At our family dinner, my wife said to me, "I invited my ex-husband to join us this year. You are just not fun to be with." I thought she was joking until my stepdaughter walked in with a man. Then she came to me and said, "Meet my real dad. The only man who makes mom happy. You are just our ATM." I was surprised and couldn't imagine what was happening. For 17 years, I played the role of a dependable man. Not flashy, not particularly loud or charismatic, but steady. I worked a good job, mid-level finance, and made sure the bills were always paid ahead of time. The mortgage, the utilities, the private school tuition for my stepdaughter, Mia. I even paid for my wife's mom's medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover them. I wasn't looking for medals or parades. I just believed that's what love was. Showing up, staying consistent. I thought if I did right by everyone, they'd see me. Not just look at me, but truly see me. Turns out, I'd mistaken silence for respect and tolerance for love. My wife, Lila, had grown colder over the years, but I chalked it up to stress, middle age, or maybe just the general dulling that comes with time. I never imagined how deep her indifference ran. Not until that night, sitting at the head of our long dining table, when she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I invited my ex-husband to join us this year. You're just not fun to be with." There was a beat of silence. The kind that makes your ears ring because your brain is still catching up, still trying to decide if what you heard was a joke or some bizarre test. I blinked at her, managing a weak smile, hoping, praying, that I'd misheard or that she'd smirk and say, "Relax, babe, I'm messing with you." But her face stayed blank, bored almost, like she'd just asked someone to pass the salt. My hands, resting on either side of the dinner plate, tightened around the edge of the table, not enough to break it, but enough to feel something other than the numbing confusion that began rising in my chest. Lila turned away, uninterested in my reaction, and reached for her wine. You could learn a thing or two from him, honestly. He knows how to make a woman laugh. That was when I heard the front door open and my stepdaughter's voice cut through the murky air. "Hey, everyone. I'm here. And guess who I brought?" she said, her voice lilting with forced excitement. The sound of heavy footsteps followed hers into the room, and then I saw him. Tall, smug, wearing a leather jacket like he'd walked off the set of a low-budget biker film. Her father, Lila's ex, the man I'd been paying to replace without even knowing it. He extended his hand to me like we were old friends. "Nice place, man. I've heard so much about you," he said, grinning. I didn't move. Couldn't. Mia walked up, threw her arm around his shoulder, and looked straight at me with eyes colder than her mother's. "Meet my real dad," she said, her voice laced with something venomous. "The only man who actually makes mom happy. You're just our ATM." No flinch. No hesitation. She just stood there, basking in the moment, as if this was some rehearsed performance and she'd finally nailed her line. I think time paused right then. It wasn't the words that hit me. It was the way they were delivered, like she'd been holding them in for years, waiting for the perfect moment to spit them in my face. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was too busy rewinding every memory, every holiday, every bill I paid, wondering if they had all been laughing behind my back. I looked at my wife, searching for some signal, remorse, embarrassment, anything, but all I saw was detachment. She was already pouring wine for him, laughing at something he'd said, and I was just sitting there, like a damn piece of furniture. Dinner went on without me. At least, that's how it felt. I remained seated for a few more minutes, my appetite gone, listening to them reminisce about some barbecue I'd never been invited to. My body was in the room, but my mind had slipped away. I started piecing things together. How she always had work trips during the holidays. Why she never wanted me to pick Mia up from school. The odd phone calls she'd take in the garage. 17 years, and it all clicked into place like a grotesque puzzle. I excused myself quietly and went upstairs, my legs barely carrying me. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection for a long time. My eyes looked older, duller. I looked like a man who had disappeared in his own life. That was the night something inside me died, and something else began to wake up. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My bed felt foreign, like I was lying in someone else's story. I thought about confronting her right then, but what would be the point? She didn't care. She hadn't cared for a long time. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to let me know I was never the husband, just the placeholder. At 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and searched for a private investigator. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad movie. But I needed confirmation. I needed to know if I was crazy or if the people I had called family were, in fact, liars with polished smiles. I booked a consultation that morning. Didn't even blink when I wired the retainer. I'd spent more on Mia's sweet 16. The next morning, Lila acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, hummed to herself in the kitchen, and even asked me if I wanted toast. I looked at her and realized I didn't recognize this woman. The curve of her lips, the way she casually moved about our kitchen, it all looked like mimicry. Like someone pretending to be a wife in a sitcom. I declined the toast. She shrugged, took her plate, and went back to her phone. That woman had told me, with a smile, that her ex-husband made her happier than I ever had, and now she was buttering bread like it was a Tuesday. I stepped outside and sat in my car for 10 minutes before I even started the engine. My hands shook, not from rage, but from clarity. 17 years of investment, and I was the only one who hadn't read the fine print. It's strange how quiet betrayal can be. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't shout. I didn't even call a friend to vent. I just walked through the next few days like a man underwater, everything muffled, slowed down, and a little too cold. I went to work, sat through meetings, answered emails. But nothing felt real. I'd built my life around the idea that consistency meant love, that if I provided, protected, and kept my promises, I would be chosen, respected, loved. But now, the reality was settling in like frostbite. I wasn't chosen. I was used. And worse, I had allowed it, enabled it, even because I never stopped to question if I was truly being seen. When someone treats you with just enough civility, you start calling it kindness. When they toss you scraps of affection, you call it a relationship. But I wasn't in a marriage. I was in a transaction. One where I paid, and they performed just enough to keep the contract going. And now, that contract had expired, publicly, shamelessly, right in my own home. The investigator moved quickly. 2 days after I'd contacted him, he invited me into his office. Small place, smelled like stale coffee and copier paper, but he was direct and efficient. "You're not crazy," he said, sliding a folder across the table. I didn't want to open it. I stared at it like it might bite me. But I forced my fingers to move. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Lila and her ex, Kevin, at what looked like a family reunion, both holding plates of food, laughing with mutual friends. Another one of them slow dancing at a wedding, arms too comfortable, too familiar. Then a handful of blurry phone logs, showing regular contact between them. Almost daily calls, long durations, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. And finally, the dagger. A legal document. A divorce petition that was never finalized. It had been filed and then withdrawn 6 months later. No record of finalization. No judge's stamp. My wife had never been fully divorced. She had married me while still legally tied to another man. I felt like vomiting. My fingers went numb as I flipped through more images, vacations, events, casual dinners. One picture showed Kevin standing next to Mia at her high school graduation, holding a bouquet I never saw. They weren't hiding. Not really. They were just excluding me, making sure I was never in the frame. I had built a 5-bedroom home, worked 12-hour days, made sacrifices, and all the while they were living this alternate life, this real family life, just outside my periphery. I'd been the outsider in my own marriage, the supporting character in their ongoing love story. I drove home slowly, the folder in the passenger seat like a bomb waiting to go off. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the driveway, watching the front door, remembering how many times I had carried groceries through it, fixed the broken steps, shoveled snow in the winter. All those little acts of care that no one clapped for, but I did anyway because I thought it mattered, because I believed it built something. When I finally stepped inside, the house felt too clean, too still. Lila was in the kitchen again, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, barely, and said, "You okay? You look tired." I placed the folder on the counter. "Read it," I said. Just those 2 words. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the pages without emotion. When she got to the last one, the divorce petition, she let out a soft sigh, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "You went through my past?" she asked, voice calm, almost bored. "No. I said, my voice low and shaking. I went through my present. Because none of this is your past, Lila. It's ongoing. She didn't deny it. Didn't argue. Just poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the sink like we were discussing some minor inconvenience. Look, she said finally. Kevin was always going to be part of my life. We share a child. You knew that. I stepped closer. I didn't know you never divorced him. I didn't know you were attending weddings together. I didn't know I was funding a lifestyle that didn't include me emotionally, socially, hell, even legally. That was when she looked at me, really looked. And what I saw in her eyes wasn't fear. It was something colder. Resentment. Contempt. You were the safe option, she said, softly. You were the man who could provide. Kevin, he's never been stable. He disappears, drinks too much, can't hold a job. But he makes me laugh. He makes me feel. She took a breath. I married you to give Mia a better life. I was doing you a favor. That broke something in me I didn't even know was still whole. I felt a chill run from the base of my spine to my teeth. A favor. 17 years of loyalty, sacrifice, effort, and I was just a charity case in her eyes. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I smiled. Not out of joy, but survival. A hollow, empty smile meant to hide the war now raging behind my ribs. I turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. That night, I didn't sleep in our bedroom. I slept on the couch, but it wasn't really sleep. It was more like a vigil. A mourning period for the version of my life I thought was real. In the morning, I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't say goodbye. I drove straight to my lawyer's office and laid everything out on the table: photos, phone logs, documents. She scanned through the materials with a growing look of disbelief. This is more than enough to build a case, she said. We can file for divorce immediately. And given her dishonesty, we may be able to reclaim a substantial amount of assets. I nodded. Do it, I said. My voice didn't tremble. I felt detached, like I was watching someone else take control of my life. But somewhere deep inside, a spark had ignited. Not of rage, but of resolve. When I returned home later that day, Lila was in the garden, watering flowers I'd planted. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The silence between us had become its own language. I stood in the doorway for a long minute before saying, "Papers are coming. I'll be gone in a few days. You can keep whatever you came with. But everything else, that's mine." She paused, then looked at me with a smirk that tried to mask uncertainty. "You're serious?" she asked. I nodded. Dead serious. Then I turned and walked upstairs, every step feeling lighter than the last. There's a moment, right after you sever something that's been slowly poisoning you, where the silence becomes deafening. It's not peace, not yet. It's more like standing in the aftermath of a wreck, surrounded by the debris of a life you tried to keep standing long after it had started to rot. That's what those next few days felt like, walking through a burned-down version of my own life, watching the smoke rise from the ashes of things I thought were solid. Lila barely spoke. She cooked, watered her plants, scrolled through her phone, and acted like we were just in the middle of some marital hiccup. Maybe she thought I'd cool off, that I'd get over it the way I always had. But something had shifted. I wasn't angry in the explosive way I used to imagine betrayal would feel. No, it was colder than that. It was like someone had unplugged the machine inside me that had kept forgiving, overlooking, and adjusting. And now, I was just standing there, surrounded by receipts of every lie, every omission, and every moment of fake affection. The divorce papers were served on a Thursday. My lawyer made sure they were delivered during the day when I'd be at work, cold, clean, official. Lila texted me 3 hours later. "Really? You couldn't talk to me first?" I didn't reply. What was there left to talk about? She'd already told me everything I needed to know when she said marrying me was a favor. Still, the audacity of that message got under my skin. It's funny how people who hurt you the most still expect grace from you, still think they deserve a seat at the table after flipping it over. That night, I came home to find her crying on the front porch. Not sobbing, not broken, just sitting there, face buried in her hands, like she wanted me to see her suffering. I stood by the car for a while, just watching. No part of me wanted to go to her. Not because I was bitter, but because I finally understood she wasn't my responsibility anymore. Her pain, her choices, her consequences, they belonged to her. Inside the house, The energy had shifted. The air felt heavier, like the walls themselves had finally exhaled after holding their breath for so long. I packed slowly, methodically, room by room. I didn't just throw clothes into a bag. I picked through things, deciding what I owned versus what I shared, and anything that reminded me of us went into a donation box. I wanted a clean break, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually. Lila hovered for a while, lurking in doorways, sometimes starting to say something, but never following through. I think she was hoping I'd snap. Maybe she thought if I screamed at her, threw something, showed how deeply she'd cut me, it would mean I still cared. But I didn't give her that. I was done bleeding for a woman who wouldn't have noticed if I'd died standing up. Mia came by 2 days later. She didn't know I was home. I heard the door open, the rustle of her voice, then the sound of her feet stomping through the hallway. "Is it true?" she said, her voice sharp, directed at her mother. "You didn't even divorce Dad?" There was a pause. I couldn't see their faces, but I heard the shift in tone. Lila's voice, low, defensive. It wasn't like that. I just never finalized it. It didn't mean anything. Mia's laugh, bitter, cold, cut through the air like glass. "You lied to him and to me. You made me think he was just this boring old guy who didn't understand you, when the whole time you were playing both sides." I stepped out then, not because I wanted to join the fight, but because I was tired of hiding. Mia turned to look at me, her face contorted in a mix of shock and guilt. "I didn't know," she said quickly, like that would fix something. "I swear, I thought you were just the backup plan." That word, backup, felt like a slap. I nodded, slow, steady. That's exactly what I was. A backup, an ATM, a fool. She tried to say something else, but I held up my hand. "Don't. It doesn't matter now." She looked like she wanted to argue, but what could she say? The truth was out, and there was no patching this up. Not with a conversation. Not with regret. The next day, the investigator sent over more evidence. I didn't even ask for it. He just kept digging on his own. More pictures. One of Lila and Kevin at a Halloween party, dressed as a king and queen, arms around each other, his hand a little too familiar on her hip. The timestamp was from 3 years ago, the same weekend she told me she was visiting her sister out of state. Another image showed them at a birthday dinner, surrounded by mutual friends I'd never met. My name didn't appear in any guest lists. I was a stranger in their world. A sponsor. A bystander. I stared at the photos for a long time that night, until my eyes blurred and my chest felt hollow. Not from heartbreak. No, that had come and gone. This was something else. A quiet grief for the man I had been before I knew any of this. The man who believed he was loved. I forwarded the images to my lawyer. She called me within the hour. "We've got leverage," she said. "We can challenge the legitimacy of the marriage, potentially reverse asset transfers. If she lied about her marital status when you wed, that's a legal issue." I nodded, pacing the room. "Take it all back," I said. "Every penny, every deed in my name, every asset I paid for. I want her to have nothing she didn't earn." It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. I'd spent too many years mistaking convenience for commitment. Now, I wanted reality, even if it was brutal. Lila tried to call me that night. I let it ring. Then she left a voicemail, her voice soft, rehearsed. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Things got complicated, and I didn't know how to fix it. I know I messed up, but I never wanted to lose you." I deleted the message before it finished. There was no healing to be done. Not with someone who only missed you when their comfort was threatened. Regret is not the same as remorse. And even if it was, it came far too late. There's a power in being quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from fear or helplessness, but the kind that comes from knowing you no longer owe anyone an explanation. That was the energy I moved with once the divorce papers were filed and the wheels of legal restitution began turning. I didn't throw tantrums or make scenes. I didn't beg for apologies or try to guilt anyone into seeing the truth. I simply stopped explaining myself. For years, I'd been the man who over-explained his feelings, his decisions, his intentions, always trying to be understood, always trying to keep the peace. But now I had no interest in peace if it came at the price of my dignity. Every smile I wore in those weeks was deliberate, intentional, and icy. Not fake, but focused. I was done playing the role of the dependable husband, who swallowed disrespect for the sake of appearances. The man they thought would never leave had already walked out in his mind. It only took 2 weeks for the consequences to start cracking through Lila's carefully curated world. First, the joint account was frozen. She called me immediately, of course, her voice sharpened by panic but wrapped in faux politeness. "Hey," she started, like we were still on casual speaking terms. "I think there's something wrong with the account. I can't access anything." I stayed quiet for a moment, let the silence sit like a stone between us, then replied, "It's not a mistake. The account is under legal review. You'll need to direct all financial questions to my attorney." There was a beat, longer than I expected, before she scoffed. "Wow, so you're just going to leave me stranded?" she asked, incredulous, as if the idea of consequences had never occurred to her. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just no longer volunteering to be used. You've got Kevin. Let him fund your life now." And then I hung up, without anger, without a second thought. It was a new kind of peace, a hard-won one, and I wasn't about to apologize for it. The house was next. That 5-bedroom monument to my sacrifice, the same one she used to brag about on social media, calling it her dream home, as if I were just the background noise financing it all. Legally, I had every right to reclaim it. She hadn't contributed a cent toward the mortgage in over a decade, and given her fraudulent marital status at the time of our wedding, the court had plenty of grounds to strip her claim to it. My lawyer filed the appropriate motions, and I moved out 2 days before the paperwork was served to her. I didn't give her a heads up. Why should I? She never gave me one before humiliating me in my own home. The day I left, I walked through every room, not sentimentally, but with closure. I wasn't looking at memories. I was confirming what I had built. Every wall, every appliance, every piece of furniture, I had provided it all. And now, I was taking my name back from all of it. The fallout hit hard. Lila showed up at my temporary apartment 3 days later, mascara streaking her cheeks, wearing a coat I had bought her 2 Christmases ago. She didn't knock at first, just stood outside the building, hoping I'd come out. When she finally buzzed the intercom, her voice trembled. "Please, can we just talk?" I didn't think it would get this far. I stared at the speaker. I could hear Kevin's voice in the background, faint but unmistakable. It was surreal. The man she said made her laugh, the one who made her feel, now muttering in irritation behind her as she begged her back up to save her life again. I pressed the intercom button. "You told me I was just your ATM," I said. "Well, sweetheart, this machine is permanently out of service." And I didn't buzz her in. Word spread fast, especially through her social circle. Apparently, some of her friends were mutual with Kevin's new girlfriend, a woman he'd been living with on and off even while rekindling things with Lila. The drama exploded online. Screenshots of texts, messy posts, indirect insults. I stayed out of it. Let them burn each other down while I stayed quiet and collected. One of her friends, Carmen, messaged me privately. "I just want you to know," she wrote. "Not all of us knew what she was doing. I used to think she was just unhappy, but now I realize she was ungrateful. You didn't deserve that." I didn't reply, but it stuck with me. Validation from someone who'd seen it unfold from the sidelines. It reminded me that I wasn't crazy. I had just been too loyal. And then came the message from Mia. It was a voice note. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what version of her I'd hear this time. The cold daughter defending her real dad, or the conflicted young woman who'd just discovered her mother's lies. Her voice cracked as soon as the message started. "I didn't know, okay? I swear, I didn't know she never divorced him. I thought you were just boring. I'm sorry I said what I said. I was stupid, and I was trying to get a reaction. I didn't realize how much you did for us until it was gone. I know I don't deserve anything, but I just needed to say it." I listened to it twice, not because I was planning to respond, but because it stunned me. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just truth, unfiltered and raw. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. I saved it. Maybe not for closure, but as a reminder that some wounds bleed from misunderstanding, not just malice. I began moving on. Quietly, deliberately. I downsized to a 2-bedroom apartment near the lake. Nothing fancy, but mine. All mine. No stage decorations, no fake joy posted for online approval. Just peace. I started taking morning walks again, something I hadn't done in years. I read books without interruption, cooked my own meals, paid for everything out of an account with only my name on it. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed without waiting for the next disappointment. Healing didn't come in one grand epiphany. It came in little things, making my own coffee, folding laundry alone, turning off my phone, and knowing no one had the power to shake my foundation anymore. People think revenge is loud, that it's dramatic, destructive, full of fire and fury. But the real revenge? It's walking away. It's reclaiming your name, your time, your energy, and never looking back. It's building something new without needing to prove anything to the people who doubted you. And that was the storm I smiled before. Not chaos, but clarity. There's a point in every storm where the wind dies down, not because it's over, but because it's changing direction. That's how it felt watching Lila's carefully constructed world begin to collapse around her. Not all at once, but in waves, like the tide pulling her comfort out to sea. I didn't need to say a word. I didn't need to gloat or announce my victory. I just watched, quiet, steady, unbothered, as reality began to knock on her door, each time with a heavier hand. The first came from the bank. She'd called 3 times in one day asking to unfreeze accounts she no longer had access to. My lawyer had made it airtight. Every transfer, every shared credit line, every asset tagged in my name was legally pulled back under my control. She'd always thought the money was ours. But it wasn't. It had always been mine. I'd just been generous. And now that the generosity was gone, she finally had to see the difference between love and dependence. Then came the house. It wasn't just the loss of property that shook her, it was the symbolism. That house had been her castle, her stage, the place she hosted her little wine nights with friends and showed off every renovation as if she'd laid the bricks herself. But when the eviction order came, cold and official, she panicked. Not because she had nowhere to go, but because she had nowhere to be seen. Kevin wasn't the knight she'd fantasized about. He had no savings, no plan, and no real interest in picking up the pieces. He told her, according to what Carmen messaged me, that she should just go back to me and fix it, as if it were that simple. But it wasn't. This wasn't a fight. It was a reckoning. And I wasn't standing still anymore. She showed up again, this time in broad daylight, in front of the law office where I'd just finished finalizing some paperwork. She stood by my car like a ghost from another life, dressed in worn-out sweats, her hair pulled back in a bun that looked like she hadn't tried. Her eyes weren't wild this time. They were empty. "Please," she said before I even got close. "You've made your point." I looked at her, really looked, and realized, for the first time, how small she seemed. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. The woman who used to carry herself like royalty now stood like a beggar asking for time. "This isn't about a point," I said quietly. "It's about dignity. Yours. And mine." She tried to step closer, but I didn't move. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "We had something. It couldn't have been all fake." I nodded, slowly. "You're right. It wasn't fake. I was real. But you never were." It was around then that the backlash started, not from me, but from the people she used to impress. Friends unfollowed her. Group chats got quiet. Invitations stopped coming. Apparently, even among those who had once cheered her on, there was a limit. No one wanted to associate with a woman who humiliated her husband publicly, kept a secret marriage hidden for years, and then tried to crawl back once the money stopped flowing. Some of the very women she had laughed with behind my back now sent me private messages, apologizing. "I'm sorry," one said. "I thought you were just cold and boring. I didn't realize how much you actually gave." That word, gave, hit me, because that's all I ever did. I gave my time, my money, my care, my loyalty. I gave without asking much in return. And all I ever got back was silence dressed as contentment. Mia's texts grew more frequent. At first, they were awkward, half apologies mixed with updates I didn't ask for. "Mom's living with Aunt Denise now. It's not going well." Or, "Kevin's back with some woman in Ohio. He blocked her number." I never encouraged the conversation, but I didn't shut her out either. There was something deeply human in the way she was unraveling too, realizing that she'd followed her mother's bitterness without ever questioning where it would lead. She sent another message late one night. I used to think you were boring because you didn't fight. But now I realize you were the only one who showed up every time it mattered. I didn't respond, but I read that one twice. Weeks passed. The settlement leaned heavily in my favor. Lila tried to push for more, claimed she had contributed emotionally to the household. My lawyer shut it down quickly with the evidence. The photos, the call logs, the unfiled divorce papers, the fraud. The judge didn't even flinch. Lila left court that day wearing sunglasses, but I could still see the way her mouth trembled when the ruling was read. It wasn't just the money. It was the collapse of a narrative she had told herself for years, that she could bend things her way, that charm and manipulation would be enough. But the truth is, even the best performances eventually lose their audience. And I had stopped clapping. One afternoon, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was from her. No legal threats. No insults. Just a letter. She wrote about how she had always felt like she wasn't enough on her own, that Kevin made her feel alive but never safe, and that I had made her feel safe but never alive. She admitted it was unfair, selfish, and cruel, but that, in her mind, she thought it balanced out because I was stronger. She said she hoped I'd find someone who could actually love me the way I deserved, and that maybe, just maybe, someday, I'd be willing to forgive her. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer I no longer opened. Forgiveness isn't always loud. It doesn't have to come with hugs or reunions. Sometimes, forgiveness is just the absence of anger. It's the decision to stop carrying the fire someone else started. I didn't forgive her for her. I forgave her for me, because I didn't want to become bitter. I didn't want her choices to define my story forever. I wanted peace, not the fragile kind that breaks under pressure, but the kind that comes from knowing you did your part, and when it wasn't enough, you walked away with your integrity intact. The thing about starting over is no one really tells you how quiet it is. There's no applause when you reclaim your peace. No audience to cheer when you finally let go of everything that once defined you. It's just you, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling in a new apartment, learning how to be okay without the roles you used to perform. I spent those first weeks in my new place feeling more like a ghost than a man. Not because I missed her. Lila had taken all the illusion with her when she left, but because I missed who I used to believe I was. The loyal husband, the steady provider, the glue. Now, there was nothing left to hold together. And strangely, that was the most freeing part of it all. No more emotional acrobatics. No more trying to read between silences. No more walking on eggshells in my own damn house. Just the sound of my own breath, steady and unrushed. I started walking every morning, down to the lake, across the old wooden bridge that used to be our picnic spot back when I thought we were happy. I bring a thermos of coffee and just sit on the bench, not thinking, not planning, just existing. And little by little, I started to feel alive again. Not in some grand, dramatic way, but in the smallest things. The way the breeze hit my skin. The way the light moved through the trees. The way the quiet didn't scare me anymore. For the first time in 17 years, I didn't have to anticipate someone else's mood. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to pretend I was okay with being invisible. I was alone, but I was free. And that freedom was worth every tear I had swallowed over the years, every betrayal I had smiled through. One day, a neighbor struck up a conversation at the local cafe I'd started frequenting. Her name was Evelyn. Mid-40s, sharp-witted, funny in that understated way that doesn't try too hard. She asked me what I did, where I lived, and before I knew it, we were sitting at a table sharing stories about bad takeout and how the local gym smells like wet cardboard. She didn't know my past. She didn't ask about Lila, and I didn't offer it, not because I was hiding, but because I was tired of leading with my wounds. That conversation lasted almost an hour. No pressure, no flirting, just connection. The kind I hadn't felt in years. It reminded me that I wasn't broken, just bruised. And bruises heal if you stop pressing on them. A few weeks later, Mia texted again. This time, it was different. Hey, I know I don't have a right to ask, but can we meet for coffee sometime? I just want to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. There was no anger in me anymore, just a cautious curiosity. I agreed, and we met at a quiet diner near campus. She looked older somehow, less entitled, more human. The first few minutes were awkward. She stirred her coffee too much, couldn't quite meet my eyes. Then she finally said, "I didn't know how much you meant to me until everything fell apart." I nodded, letting her speak. "You were always there. Even when we made fun of you. Even when we rolled our eyes. You never left. And I wish I had said thank you before it was too late." I didn't cry. I didn't make a speech. I just reached across the table and said, "It's not too late to be honest." And for the first time, I saw her as something more than Lila's daughter. I saw her as a young woman trying to undo the mess she inherited. That meeting didn't change everything, but it shifted something in me. It reminded me that not all bridges had to burn to the ground. Some could smolder and still be crossed with caution. I didn't forgive her right away. That's not how life works. But I gave her space, and she respected it. That was enough. As for Lila, she tried again, one final attempt. This time, it was a letter in the mailbox. No stamp, no envelope. Just folded paper with my name scribbled in shaky pen. "I know you'll never take me back," it began. "And I don't blame you. I just hope you find happiness. Real happiness. The kind I couldn't give you." I didn't tear it up. I didn't respond. I just let it be. Because closure doesn't always need a confrontation. Sometimes it's just knowing that the door is closed, locked, and you hold the only key. The property sold. The funds were transferred. The last shared asset was no longer shared. Everything she once flaunted was now a line item in a court file and a past she could no longer revise. I didn't look back. I didn't drive by. I didn't wonder what she was doing in the old house or who she blamed next. I had spent too long living inside her narrative. Now, I was writing my own. And this story didn't have room for someone who used love like currency. Now, every night before I sleep, I light one small candle by my window. It's a ritual, nothing spiritual, just a reminder. A symbol that even in the dark, something gentle can burn. That I can still choose warmth without getting scorched. And sometimes, I think about all the men out there still stuck in roles that are killing them slowly. Still pouring themselves into people who only see their value in dollar signs. And I wish I could tell them what I now know. That leaving isn't weakness. That setting boundaries isn't cruelty. That choosing yourself after years of erasure isn't selfish. It's survival. I may have been their ATM. But now, I'm my own foundation. No more withdrawals. No more overdrafts of energy. Just deposits of peace. If you've ever felt like a background character in your own life, used, overlooked, or only valued for what you provide, this story is your reminder that you're not alone. And more importantly, you have every right to walk away. Not for revenge, but for restoration. If this story hit home, take a moment to like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more raw, real-life stories about choosing self-respect over being taken for granted. And tell me in the comments, what finally made you choose peace over being tolerated? See you soon in the next story.